We're joined now by Avi Mayer. He's the former editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post. Avi, good morning. Always wonderful to have you on the program. Let's talk about what happens next here. And of course, this breaking news that has been just into CNN with the Israelis saying that they struck a chemical weapons capacity in the country. What else do we know at this point, and how are you looking at how this is going to play out?
Well, Casey, good morning. I think what we're likely to see is some period of instability and chaos as the country hopefully coalesces into some kind of a coherent, unified future. We hope, of course, that Syria will end up being a liberal democracy that will seek to live at peace alongside all its neighbors, including, of course, the state of Israel. But Israel, of course, can't wait for that to happen, which is why you saw those airstrikes taking place earlier today. Israel hitting chemical weapons facilities and others in order to ensure that they don't fall into the wrong hands and aren't then directed at Israel. It's undeniable that the fall of the Assad regime is good news, not least, of course, for the people of Syria, but also for the region and the world. Syria, the Assad regime, have been a key pillar of Iran's axis in the region, and the fall of that pillar, I think, significantly constricts Iran's ability to spread its malign influence across the Middle East. But of course, we'll have to see what the next day will bring.
Yeah, Avi, how do you understand what is the driving the rebel forces in terms of, I shouldn't say what is driving them, but rather how they are going to interact with the people of Syria and what that may mean for the region? We've seen this one rebel commander who said that this will still mean that this is a Syria for everyone, for all religious sects, suggesting there may be some religious tolerance. But obviously, you heard there al-Jolani say it was an Islamic place. How much does that matter as well in terms of what we're going to see next year?
Well, it matters a great deal. It's important to realize that the rebel groups are made up of all sorts of factions representing all kinds of interests. In the north of the country, you have the Kurds, who, of course, have been a thorn in Turkey's side for a very long time, but are allied with the United States. South in the country, you have other groups that are also allied with the United States, have been acting to some degree in concert with U.S. forces. But the primary groups in the center of the country really are these Islamist jihadist organizations that in the past, in fact, have been allied with al-Qaeda or with ISIS. That, of course, is who al-Jolani represents. And there are, of course, many who have expressed concerns about what that means for the future of Syria. They have expressed in recent days more moderate tones and have expressed a desire to rule in a way that is inclusive and democratic. We have to hope that that is indeed what transpires, and that is a democratic future for the people of Syria.
Avi, we also, of course, know that the Americans have been striking in central Syria, where you noted ISIS, right? And that is, of course, why American troops continue to be on the ground in Syria. We also saw the incoming president-elect Donald Trump post about this earlier this weekend. He said this: "Syria is a mess, but it's not our friend. The United States should have nothing to do with it. This is not our fight. Let it play out. Do not get involved." And then in another post, he talked about Assad, Russia, and the ties between Russia, Syria, and Ukraine. And he says of the Russians, quote, "They lost all interest in Syria because of Ukraine, where close to 600,000 Russian soldiers lay wounded or dead in a war that never should have started," and could go on forever. First of all, do you think that the United States should have nothing to do with Syria? Do you see the strategic presence of the United States as relevant to Israel's security in Syria? And what do you make of the president-elect's comments?
Look, I don't think the United States can afford to withdraw from this region. Any vacuum that's formed by the fall of the Assad regime will be filled. The question is by whom? It could be filled by China, Russia, or perhaps even Iran again, or it could be filled with more moderate Arab states and by the United States and its allies. So we certainly hope that the future of this region is one that, of course, tilts towards a more moderate future. And I don't think that the United States can withdraw entirely. I'm not really sure that the president-elect intends to do that either. I think he sees this as something of an opportunity, perhaps also to constrain Russia's rather malign influence in this part of the world. And of course, he was very welcoming of the Assad regime's fall, which he attributed, as by the way, did the Biden administration, of course, Prime Minister Netanyahu himself, to the successes that Israel has had against Iran and its proxies in recent months, basically saying that had Israel not weakened the Iranian axis of what they call resistance across this region, that the rebel forces would not have been emboldened to push forward and bring about the Assad regime's collapse. So I think what we see happening is a new future for this region, hopefully a realignment of forces, and one that brings key forces in this region in a more moderate and pro-Western direction.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, Avi Mayer for us this morning, sir. Always grateful to have you on the show. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.